inspiring entrepreneurs to rise, innovate, and create lasting impact. And today I have my special guest, one of its advocacy helping individuals, business owners, and corporate sales personnel achieve rapid sustainable growth. None other than Dr. Joseph Drolshagen.
Great to be here with you.
Welcome once again, Dr. Joseph, to one of my podcasts. And can you please introduce more about yourself that I missed?
Absolutely. So, I'll start out in business because I started out on the ground floor of sales, doing outside sales, developing territories. I was barely scraping by. I was always nervous about losing my job. And I couldn't figure out what made me different than the guys that were taking off on Friday and golfing, coming in late on Mondays, and they were just killing it, And for a long time, 2 decades, I went into trying to figure out what was the matter with me and why there was such a huge difference in what they were producing to where I was. And in doing so, what I ended up finding out through, like I said, 2 decades of research, study, schooling, everything else, was that it was because the programming I was following was different than the programming they were following. They were following programming that told them that, opportunities are endless and they can achieve whatever they want to achieve. And for me, my programming said if I didn't work hard enough for something, I didn't deserve to get rewarded by it and such. And as I started identifying those things and shifting those, all of a sudden the doorways started opening up. And like I said, for years, I was barely scraping by, always nervous about losing my job, traveling 3,000 to 5,000 miles every week, trying to develop territories and barely making a mark, to landing $18 million, $22 million. And the largest was a $25 million year-over-year contract. And they happened easier. And as I started understanding that programming that was leading the way for me, is I started identifying what it was. I had to get help, but I started being able to identify what it was. And then I went to work trying to figure out, so how do I change this? Now that I'm aware of it, what do I do? And that was a whole nother, almost decade of study trying to figure that out. It's what my doctorate degree is in, which is the mindset, but more specifically, the subconscious programming within us. That subconscious, what I call a motherboard in our subconscious, is the voice we hear in our head. It's that voice that says, oh, who do you think you are? You can't do that, or that can't be that easy, and all of that. But it's also the really important part of that subconscious is that it triggers the brain waves to the actions we take or don't take. So if I'm in a situation where I know what I want to do and I want to get all kinds of leads, I want to be, new purchase orders for new business and such. And I want to do that. And I want it to be easy and I want it to be fun and exciting. We that's what we all want. But the programming inside of me said that, I had to work my tail off to get things. Like, I grew up in programming, like, if you want something, you got to be willing to trade your life off for it. And how long have we heard that in business? That you got to do the right thing at the right time, exactly the right way. And none of that is true. And I've proved that all wrong in my own life. From this kid growing up in Detroit, Michigan, in blue collar America, and I don't begrudge it at all. Like my family and generations come from blue collar in my family. So, but from that place to getting into sales, to developing massive territories, to ending up in a vice president of sales position, to helping companies in bankruptcy get back to profitability, all of that stuff, that programming would not have allowed me to live the life I live today and even be talking with you today, Daniel, had I followed that. Does that make sense?
Makes sense, Dr. Joseph, and thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world. Thank you. And today let's talk about keep blaming outside circumstances for lack of growth. So tell us, Dr. Joseph, blaming external circumstances, the economy, the competition, the boss, the market, is psychological protective. Is it preserve the ego? What is the emotional cause of relinquishing that shelter even when blame is justified?
I think one of the leading cause to it is that we live in a world that you have to know the answer, and you have to know where to go to get it, and you have to know what to do, and all of those things is, again, everything I talk about is going to be related to that subconscious programming, because that's what hosts all of those beliefs. And so in doing so, if we don't know where to go, but we're programmed that we have to know, then what's the logical thing to do? Is to place us in being victims of the state of the economy, victim of competition, victim of circumstances, and all that. And it's not that we walk around and want to be victims, but the real answer to that question of why my business isn't growing, it's okay, and it's a starting point to say, I really don't know. But so few people are willing to do that. And so what I tell people when they start blaming outside situations and circumstances is, we've all seen companies that have taken their greatest strides in growing their business during a down economy. And we all know a lot of businesses that struggle during boom times. So it can't be the state of the economy. It can't be because of competition. Both of those things can be used as assets in a low economy, in a reduced economy, that can charge us up to doing things in ways we wouldn't do during boom times. And so that can take that growth there and then accentuate it even more as the economy starts coming back. Competition is a good source when we get into alignment with it and not look at it as a force against us or an enemy. Competition can be great to help us grow our business. One of the things I do very regularly is I help other people do what I do to succeed in what they do, to be more successful in what they do, because I know that only grows my mission and my purpose and the impact that I get to have in other people's lives. So it's all in how and here's the other thing I want to tell you, Daniel. I talk about the programming, right?
Mm-hmm.
But at any time, if we're not getting what we want to get in life, it's because our perceptions of the world, our perceptions of how we fit into the world are skewed. They're not in alignment with what we desire. That our perceptions all come from our subconscious programming. So if we're not getting what we desire to achieve in this world and the growth of our business and things like that, then what it is we go back into the programming and we identify that lack programming in there. We shift that. And as soon as we do, we shift our perceptions, which then equals greater results for our efforts.
So, Dr. Joseph, there is a fine line between acknowledging legitimate obstacles and using them as alibis for inaction. How do you know in real time whether you are diagnosing a problem or manufacturing a permission slip?
There are differences. I don't know how fine of a line it is when I'm in that development mode. So I'll give you for instance, after COVID and such, because before COVID, my business, I was doing better than I'd ever gone on in corporate America within a year's time frame. COVID hit, everything dropped out. I think it was 15 or 16, maybe 14 speaking events all canceled in one day because of what COVID, happened with COVID, and it happened with everybody else. So I went back to the drawing board, so to speak, and I came out with how I was going to overcome that. And I came out with 4 different pillars that I was going to structure my business as and stuff. And so I started building and going into massive effort and everything else trying to do this. And really what it did is it led to burnout and exhaustion for me. It led to 2 of the people on my team quitting, and partially because of COVID, but partially because I was so pushing and pushing and pushing, trying to make things happen and everything. And so what came of that is I know the 4 pillars, but I focus on one of them. And I put my effort into one of them, and I get it going almost like a light switch where I can turn it on and off. And then once I have that one going and now it's growing and it's producing, now I can take the revenues coming from that and expand into the second pillar. And now and eventually be the third pillar and then the fourth pillar. So instead of having, one of the things that happen when things tighten up is we start putting more effort and trying to do more things to bring it all together. And it's really an unaligned pathway to follow down, if that makes sense.
Makes sense, Dr. Joseph. The victim's dividend. Blaming outside circumstances often yields a secondary gain, sympathy, lowered expectations, relief from pressure. What are you asking someone to give up when you ask them to stop blaming?
Yeah, one of the things I mean, that was so well said what you said, that you should do the applause thing, Daniel. But one of the things with
Thank
that
you.
is as we start aligning with what we desire, we have to misalign with the crowd of people, the army we've built of allies who want to live a life of complaining about everything, right? Who want to blame other people and other things and such for the current situation being the way it is. As we start getting more into alignment, all of a sudden some of those things either have to change or they fade away. Some of those relationships we have, some of the people that we do what's called masterminding or things like that with, which really can be just a big complaint session. So as we start aligning, we start getting more in place of the solution happening, and we're moving away from the problem. Does that make sense?
Sounds Dr. Joseph. So, how about the leader's lens? When a direct reporter presents you with the external obstacles, how do you distinguish between the employee who is truly blocked and the employee who is truly avoiding?
Yeah, the way I determine that, because one of the pillars I work within is within corporate environments, and I help elevate a greater percentage of sales staff to top producers within the organization, and I do so in months. And so with that, I do a 15-minute interview with the potential candidates of the salespeople. And out of that 15 minutes, I can come out of that conversation and be able to talk with the vice president of sales, director, whoever's leading the sales team, which is who hires me, and tell them which would be their best candidates to elevate to top producers within the organization. And the way I do that, if you look at the sales team, there's typically a limited amount of top producers within the sales team. And then a majority of the sales team is people in that middle of the pack. When I go through that, I can tell you which ones of those people in the middle of the pack are in the middle of the pack because they're lacking belief in themselves, or it's coming from their programming and the messages that it's given them, and which people are just okay being in that middle of the pack. People in that middle of the pack that are okay, they'll never achieve top producers. So to waste effort on them to elevate them up is not really going to produce anything. The people that are hungry for it, but they just don't know what's getting in their way, those are the tomorrow's champions. And it's the same way with business owners. It goes all the way through the founders and, excuse me, business owners, corporate, whatever it is.
Very well said, Dr. Joseph. So, let's talk about the control audit. In any given setback, there are factors you control, factors you influence, and factors you merely watch. Why do we intensively or inti- inactively anchor to the factors that we cannot control rather than the ones we could?
It's okay. So I spoke of the subconscious mind, right?
Yes.
And we don't have full control over the subconscious mind. However, this is where it's kind of splits back or goes back to the conscious mind. In our conscious mind, we know what we want. Whether we're coming up with goals, visions, whatever it may be, that comes from our conscious mind, our imagination, like all that we build that into what we want. Okay. We have some control on how everything that we do flows to the subconscious. So somebody who in their conscious mind is talks about people. I just read something last week where something from Socrates, and he said, great men talk about ideas.
Mm-hmm.
Average men talk about events, and below average men talk about people. That's a conscious decision we make. How often do we sit around talking about people or maybe even events instead of ideas? What do we watch on television? What kind of people do we hang around with? Do we hang out with a bunch of people who complain about their life and complain about the state of the economy and complain? Or do we talk about people who are in that solution side, that mastermind and looking for breakthroughs and looking for, in all of those things? So we do have control over that. Does that make sense, Daniel? So what happens with a lot of people is there's a mismatch between their conscious mind, the knowing of what they want, and the subconscious mind that triggers the brain waves to the actions we take or don't take. So what I do is I specialize in closing that gap between the conscious mind and the subconscious mind. So now what we're focused on consciously is feeding into. And as we're identifying and shifting the subconscious, now they're working in alignment with each other. That's when we become powerhouses in building, growing, expanding, whatever it is we're looking to do out of that conscious mind.
Very well said, Dr. Joseph. Tell me your friends, and I will tell you who you are, as they said. The 51% rule. If you are waiting for 100% of the circumstances to be perfect before you act, you will never act. What is the minimum viable control threshold of what a percentage of influence does inaction become a choice?
One of the things I change in a lot of my clients is, or help them to change in their pathway, is we don't need to see the whole puzzle put together. We just need one action, right? Empires are built on one single action. And as we take that action, the next action opens itself up. And so all we have to do, instead of worrying about all the things, and this is what so many people get so burned out, exhausted, fed up, angry, whatever on, is they looking at the whole picture all the way to the end. But we really have no way of knowing what that is anyways. So what I do is bring them back and I have to, most clients I work with that are founders, business owners, professional salespeople, is I have to get them to throttle back a little bit. And in throttling back, what we can do now is we can start putting the focus on single actions, because it's only one single action. If I want to get up from here and go get a cup of coffee, I only need to take one action. I need to stand up. Then the next action will show up, which I need to walk in, carry my coffee cup into the other room, and it like, again, people have built empires off of a single action.
Certainly, Dr. Joseph, let's build this empire. So let's talk about the blame fossil. Blame is often fossilized emotion, old anger that is hardened into identity. How do you help someone unearth the original wound that makes accountability feel so threatening?
Yeah, one of the things with anger, one of the things typically when it relates to business growth or things like that, what turns it to anger is the deeper core of it, which is, I really don't know what's causing this. And I really don't know what to do to turn it around and get back into growth mode. That's really what causes the anger. And one of the things I learned as I was going through this as a student myself, because everything I do, I've been a guinea pig of, in my own life, just trying to fix me. And so going through that, I could not identify those patterns, paradigms, belief systems, and all that within the subconscious that was causing limitation. I had to, once I figured out that was a problem, now I had to go out and find somebody who could help me see that in my life, because I couldn't see that for myself. And so as I started identifying what those were, and I started noticing a couple of them, one of them for me was things growing up, like, a man gets a job, supports a family, and hopefully lives a couple years in retirement before they pass away. Like that, you work yourself to death. If you want something, you got to be willing to trade off life to get it. That money doesn't grow on trees. Who do you think you are? The Rockefellers? Like, those are messages that were in my subconscious that eventually I started, somebody helped me to identify those, but I didn't know what to do about it. And that's when I went busy developing tools that are now part of the SMT method, which is subconscious monetization technology. that I use with every one of my clients and take them through so we can identify those, shift those, which again, immediately shifts our perceptions and opens up the door to greater results, greater opportunities, and potential with what we're doing.
Greater opportunities indeed. So, Dr. Joseph, can you expound more these phrases to on your website, saying shift your revenue, sealing into rapid accelerated growth while reclaiming your freedom?
Yes. So, I mean, I can give you some testimonials in my own life, but I mean, I've worked with hundreds of clients over the past decade, and I have helped companies go from a few $100,000 and within 12 months topple over $2 million in revenue and maintain that and continue to grow that. I have worked with companies that, early on, I was working with a company that was doing maybe $2,000 a month in revenue. And within a year and a half, they were doing $60,000 a week in revenue. Now they're out acquiring similar companies to them to build their empire, that which was their vision to do. My greatest one is I worked with a company that was $7.5 million revenue as a 13-year high in business. Within 12 months, toppled over $22 million and has been maintaining that for the past 7 years. Not only that, Daniel, that year of growth was the first year in that person's adult life they took 5 weeks of vacation during that year of growth. So as we start getting into alignment, as we start opening up and doing all the, getting the alignment going with the conscious, the subconscious, and putting that into alignment with a dynamic vision, as we start aligning those things, all of a sudden the successes start growing and we start seeing more of them with less effort on a day-to-day basis. So it opens up more free. Every client I have will tell you they have more free time now than they ever thought they could, while they still build a successful, run a successful business.
Wow, congratulations. Congratulations, Dr. Joseph, for that. Keep up the good work and let's empower people all over the world through your advocacy. So before we wrap up our discussion for today, I'm inviting you to please do listen to my other podcast, people, because my abstract essay is already in 6th season, abstract poetry and 3rd season, and my book 101 review in 6th season as well, comedy 101 4th season, and food 101 in its 6th season as well, geography 101 love letters, movie 101 review, music 101 are in 5th season, science 101, sex 101 4th season, spiritual awakening, trivia 101, law 101, mental health 101, motivation 101, Entrepreneurship 101, as well as Bible Verses 101 on my baby podcast. Please listen to them wherever you listen your podcast. So, Dr. Joseph, imagine you wake up tomorrow and every external obstacles you currently blame, the market, the boss, the economy, the lack of resources, has magically resolved itself. You have exactly what you asked for. Are you absolutely certain you will finally grow? Or is it impossible that you would simply find new obstacles?
I know I'll always find new not obstacles or opportunities. I'll continue to find new opportunities, new ways of doing things to continue to grow and expand with what my purpose, but also my passion. Like I tell you about my clients' results, but I am so blessed to even get to be a part of people's growth and expansion like that it was worth all the pain I went through trying to understand my own life.
Beautifully said, Dr. Joseph. So can you please invite our listeners to support your advocacy, your business, or whatever projects that you're doing right now?
Absolutely. I'd invite anybody into an introductory call with me, and it's really laser focused into removing plateaus in people's business. Anybody can go to performance.smtmethod.com and schedule a 20-minute call with me. And there's no sales, there's no pitch. It's really to serve people.
To serve people indeed. Yes, people. Let's support Dr. Joseph Drolshagen, because if you support him, for sure, more and more empowering business will rise. And I have one more question, Dr. Joseph. Blaming external circumstances is often an attempt to prove that you were right and the world was wrong. But being right and being successful are not the same thing. What is the price of needing to be right?
I've seen businesses who thought they had it on their own and close the doors to their business and ended up going back to work for somebody else. I've seen people, because the same mentality works across the board. I've seen people who have gone through divorce because of that desire, that need to be right.
Mhm.
They didn't understand anything the other person was saying or anything about what was really going on because they had that strong need.
Very well said, Dr. Joseph. I hope you will be my regular guest on Entrepreneurship 101, and let's talk about something good, and let's empower people all over the world through your knowledge and wisdom. So thank you so much for your time.
And thank you, Daniel. This is a great conversation.
Likewise. So much fun, people. See you soon.
Well, I'll be on